20 years ago, a heartbreaking scene unfolded under the cold drizzle of a July night. A car, two self-absorbed young people, and a cruel decision to leave a 2-month-old baby wrapped in a pink blanket inside a shopping cart right at the door of a church. They laughed, turned around, and disappeared onto the wet asphalt, never looking back. An act of abandonment that would echo for decades. Today, the empire built by that same child, now one of the most brilliant and innovative minds in the country, has just received, at its main entrance, 2 hungry beggars, their dignity in tatters and their eyes lost. Fate, with its peculiar irony, orchestrated an unthinkable reunion. They are the same people who threw her away. She knows, but them? Oh, they had no idea. The question that hung in the air, dense and inescapable, was just one. Forgive or return the abandonment in kind. Stay with us until the end, because the answer, I guarantee, will leave you floored. The night was cold, frigid, and the calendar marked a harsh July. The church tower clock, with its illuminated hands, showed 11:41 p.m. when the car, a model that flaunted a certain youthful luxury, stopped abruptly at a red light. Inside that cocoon of metal and glass, 3 distinct presences. Him, Ryan, 23 years old, an expensive team jersey stretched over his chest, his eyes welling with a pride that seemed to fight against cowardice. Beside him, her, Jessica, 21, her red lipstick surprisingly intact, defying the tears that streamed down her face. And between them, a small burden. A baby, wrapped in a pink blanket that still exuded a sweet smell of cheap powder, an innocent perfume that contrasted with the bitterness of the moment. Come on, we can't take care of her anymore. It's for the best, isn't it? Whispered Ryan, his voice a thread, as if the phrase itself, spoken aloud, had the power to alleviate the unbearable weight of the decision. He sought validation, an echo to convince him that this was, in fact, the right path. Jessica, wiping her own tears with the back of her hand, responded with a cynicism that barely disguised her desperation. Yeah, and who's going to care about one more kid on the street? No one will even notice. It's what everyone does, right? It was an attempt to justify the unjustifiable, to convince herself that they were just following a script already written by so many others. The truth is that the fear of the future, of responsibility, of losing the youth and freedom they so cherished, spoke louder. They saw themselves as trapped, and the tiny creature in the back seat was the symbol of that prison. The light turned green, a signal that seemed like an invitation to escape. The car cut the corner with unnecessary speed, stopping in front of the imposing church steps, a stone refuge that would soon harbor a secret. The back door opened with a funereal creak, then closed with a dry thud. The shopping cart, with its precious cargo, was unceremoniously pushed to the curb, a disposable object awaiting the trash. The engine roared again, impatient. They laughed. That nervous, almost hysterical laugh of someone desperately trying to convince themselves they are making the only possible choice, the most rational, the least painful for them. And then, they vanished into the dark of night, leaving behind not just a baby, but a piece of their own souls corroded by cowardice. 15 minutes later, the sky fell. A torrential rain, as if nature itself were weeping at the injustice, weighed so heavily that the thin fabric of the shopping cart's canopy threatened to give way under the volume of water. It was at that exact moment that the church's janitor, a man with a big heart and deep wrinkles named Mr. John, came out to check the gate, armed with an old patched umbrella. And then he saw her, the baby's wide eyes, which, surprisingly, were no longer crying. She watched, with an intensity that seemed to transcend her tender age, as if she already understood the magnitude of the betrayal, the depth of the abandonment. That image struck him like lightning, a pang in the chest of John, a man who, along with his wife, Mrs. Antonia, carried the silent burden of infertility. John, with trembling hands, took out his phone and called his wife. His voice cracking, he told her what he had seen. Mrs. Antonia, on the other side of the line, did not hesitate. "Bring her home, John. God has brought us a daughter." In that instant, between the rain and the desperation of a night, they made a decision that would change their lives forever. They decided that if no one came to claim her by the end of the weekend mass, She would be the daughter that God, in His infinite wisdom, had given them as a gift, a miracle wrapped in a pink blanket. They didn't know her name, her story, or the future of that little being, but they knew that love didn't need a certificate to be born. The Williams house was small, modest but overflowing with human warmth. 2 rooms that extended into multiple purposes, the kitchen that sometimes became a dining room, and the yard, a multifunctional space that served as a laundry, a garden, and on sunny days, a playground. But despite the small dimensions, there was an abundance of affection that couldn't be measured, a type of wealth that money could never buy. The girl, now under the loving care of John and Antonia, was given a name on her birth certificate the next day, a name that sounded like a melody, Maya Williams. A new last name, a new identity, a new beginning. Maya grew not only in stature but in intellect. Too fast for the clothes Mrs. Antonia lovingly sewed, and too fast for the books she devoured with an insatiable hunger. At 3, she was already reading comic books aloud, stumbling only on the most complex words, those that not even many adults mastered. At 5, with an unshakable curiosity and small, agile fingers, she disassembled and repaired the neighbor's radio, replacing a tiny capacitor that the owner himself didn't even know existed. It was as if she saw the world in codes, in systems, in pieces that fit together with a logic that escaped most people. At 7, while other children played with dolls, Maya built a rudimentary computer from parts she found at the neighborhood dump, turning what was discarded into something functional and fascinating. At 10, her teachers would often ask her to explain complex subjects to them, not for lack of knowledge, but because they admired the clarity and depth of her reasoning. "Daughter, you've always been special. Your intelligence is a gift, Maya, a gift from God," Mrs. Antonia would say, her eyes full of pride, as she sewed the 3rd patch onto the same school uniform. An act of love and sacrifice that Maya would never forget. It was through these small actions, these daily gestures, that unconditional love was woven into the girl's life, and Maya would respond with a smile that lit up her face, a smile that made any parent feel like the whole world could fit inside a hug. She was living proof that family is not defined by blood, but by the bonds built with care, dedication, and true love. But as often happens, such an extraordinary gift was accompanied by a persistent doubt, a gap in her story that Maya's inquisitive mind could not ignore. At 12, she began to notice that none of her features, the tea-colored eyes, the hair that formed perfect curls with the slightest breeze, the peculiar way she laughed with the tip of her tongue in the corner of her mouth, matched those of the Williams family. She was a genetic enigma in the middle of a family puzzle. It was then that, during a routine tidying up, she found the adoption certificate, carefully stored inside a shoebox under her parents' bed. The paper, yellowed with time, revealed the truth of her origin. The revelation, however, did not break her. On the contrary, it reinforced a certainty that had already been forming within her. She needed to build something so great, so undeniable, that no parent would ever think of abandoning her again. That discovery, far from being a paralyzing trauma, became a catalyst for her ambition, a flame that would propel her to unimaginable heights. The pain of abandonment would be transformed into fuel for building a future where she would be the architect of her own destiny, and where love and recognition would be earned, not begged for. The idea, that spark of genius that would change everything, came on a radiant Saturday, a day that seemed to promise only lightness and carefree moments. Maya was 16 and had just won first place in the physics Olympiad, a feat that, for most, would be the pinnacle of a journey. But for her, it was just another step. As she walked thoughtfully through the bustling street fair, the diploma still fresh in her mind, her sharp eyes caught a scene that hit her hard. A boy, perhaps about 8 years old, held the hand of his even smaller sister and begged, not with words, not with pleas, but with a closed mouth, just holding out his small, dirty hand, a silent gesture that screamed desperation. His gaze, empty and resigned, was the same one she, Maya, had seen in the mirror years ago. At the moment, she discovered her adoption certificate, the look of someone who learned too early that the world often asks for permission to hurt, to punish without mercy. That look haunted her. She arrived home with her head buzzing, tore open the envelope with the prize money, $1,000. A fortune by her family's standards, and instead of spending it, she drafted a business plan on the back of her math notebook between complex equations and formulas. Page 1, written in the hurried handwriting of someone in a rush to change the world, said, 1. Buy recycled computer for $50. 2. Sell for $150. 3. Use the profit to buy bread and milk for families. Repeat until the number of happy people is greater than the number of hungry people. It was simple, direct, and profoundly human. She spent the next 2 years refining that plan, which went from a scribbled page to a 20-page tome of projections, strategies, and dreams. At 18, she was knocking on investors' doors, most of whom received her with a condescending smile and a polite no. Many of them laughed at this bright-eyed girl who spoke of e-waste recycling as if it were the cure for all social ills. E-waste? Social impact? That doesn't make money, young lady, was what she heard most often. But one, just one, investor had the vision to look beyond the surface. A social impact fund, known for betting on disruptive ideas, saw something in her that most had ignored. Perhaps it was the passion in her eyes, the speed with which she rattled off equations and projections, the clarity of her mission. They bet $50,000 on this girl who seemed like a whirlwind of ideas. And so, with this injection of confidence and capital, Nexus Ascend was born. Nexus Ascend was not just a company, it was a philosophy. Its mission was revolutionary, to recover electronic waste, transforming it into valuable raw material. But it went far beyond profit. The company created dignified jobs for scrap collectors and vulnerable individuals, offering training, fair wages, and safe working conditions. And most impactfully, it donated 40% of its profits in tech baskets, a tablet with internet access, to public schools in underserved communities. It believed that access to technology and information was a right, not a privilege. At 22, Maya was not just a CEO. She was a force of nature. Her business was making millions, employed 300 direct and indirect staff, and fed 5,000 families a month, not just with food, but with dignity and opportunity. The press, in its frenzy for modern heroes, called her the recycling genius, the social tech wizard. But Maya, with her characteristic humility, always preferred to be known as Mrs. Antonia's daughter. It was a constant reminder of her roots, of the strength of the love that shaped her, and of the promise she had made to herself never to forget where she came from. While Maya was ascending, building an empire of innovation and social impact, the couple who had abandoned her 2 decades earlier were digging themselves into an ever-deepening hole, a downward spiral that seemed to have no end. Ryan and Jessica, now in their early 40s, had inherited a considerable fortune from their parents, but they spent it with the same recklessness with which they had discarded their daughter. Easy promises of quick riches, dubious investments, and a life of empty ostentation. Ryan, with his eternal search for shortcuts, decided to become a day trader, throwing money at the stock market with the same irresponsibility with which he breathed. He lost the house in the first financial crisis that shook the market, a fall that left him floored, literally and figuratively. Jessica, for her part, with dreams of a glamorous life, opened a designer boutique, a venture doomed to fail in the midst of a devastating recession. The doors closed, taking with them not only the capital, but also the last vestige of her pride. They began to sell what they had. First the imported car, then the designer watch, the wedding rings. Each object was a piece of their old life slipping away, a reminder of what they had been and what they were becoming. When there was nothing of material value left, they sold something even more precious, their dignity. The path led them to soup kitchen lines, where anonymity was a disguise for shame. The marriage, already fragile, became a bridge of empty cups, unspoken words, and accumulated resentments. They slept on park benches, under awnings, under the precarious protection of cardboard and tarps. One day, amidst the cold and inhumane routine of the streets, Jessica found an old, crumpled newspaper that served as a makeshift blanket. As she tried to warm herself under its pages, her eyes scanned a feature article, the child prodigy of social tech. The last name Williams, though common, caught her attention for a moment. But the last name didn't matter. The face did. The photo of a young woman, radiant and confident, graced the page. The upturned nose, the peculiar smile, the intensity in her eyes. It was unmistakable. A cold pang in her stomach, a late and devastating recognition. "Ryan, I think we made the most absolute mistake possible," Jessica whispered, her voice choked, her eyes fixed on the image of the daughter they had abandoned. The irony of fate was cruel, biting. He didn't answer immediately. He was too busy, hunched over, trying in vain to warm his hands inside a plastic bag that served as a makeshift glove. Misery had eroded not only his possessions, but also his ability to react, to feel, to even face the truth. His silence was the most painful answer. They were at rock bottom, and the face on the newspaper cover was living proof that while they were falling, their daughter, the one they had discarded, was flying high. Maya, with her intense work pace, had a habit of eating lunch in the company cafeteria, mingling with interns and employees, keeping herself accessible and connected to the base of her empire. However, on that particular Friday, fate had other plans. A last-minute meeting with important donors had delayed her, and she decided to have a quick sandwich in her office, poring over reports and spreadsheets. It was then that, through the vast double-paned glass window that offered a panoramic view of Nexus Ascend's main entrance, she saw them, two thin figures, bent by life on the streets, stood hesitantly on the sidewalk, like indecisive shadows. The security guard, a large and imposing man, made clear gestures for them to move away, his firm posture contrasting with the fragility of the newcomers. Maya couldn't explain it, but a sharp pang in her chest, a strange and familiar sensation, screamed for her attention. Her instinct, sharp as ever, told her something important was happening. She went down. Each step of the staircase seemed to amplify her heartbeat. She approached, her curiosity mixed with a dark premonition. She recognized the look, even before she recognized the faces, marked by time and the harshness of life. Ryan seemed smaller, shrunken, his graying hair in uneven tufts, his face furrowed with deep wrinkles, his skin weathered by the sun and cold, but above all, marked by a silent regret. Jessica beside him had cracked lips, her trembling hands holding a makeshift piece of cardboard where a shaky script announced, "Hungry. Any help is welcome." The sight was devastating, a distorted mirror of the past. Maya stopped a meter away, maintaining an invisible but palpable barrier. The silence that followed was so heavy that even the lobby's intercom seemed to hold its breath, the atmosphere charged with an almost electric tension. You don't know who I am," she began, her voice firm, though emotion fought to break through. It was a statement, not a question. Ryan, without the courage to face her, his eyes fixed on the floor, mumbled, "I'm sorry. We don't know what to say. We're going through a hard time, miss. Any help?" His voice trailed off, full of shame. "I understand," Maya replied, without a hint of sarcasm, almost curious. "But why now after so long? Why here?" Jessica then finally looked up, and the glass of her pupils, clouded with misery and despair, burst into tears. "We didn't know it was you. Our daughter." The word "our" slipped to the ground and shattered into 1,000 pieces, revealing the fracture of a connection that never truly existed. The admission, though late, was a tsunami of pain and recognition. Maya took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. She turned to the security guard, whose expression alternated between confusion and concern. "I've got this," she said, her voice now filled with unquestionable authority. "I'll take care of it." It was a promise, a burden, and the beginning of a chapter no one expected. She could have chosen the empty auditorium, the impersonal and grand space, to maintain an emotional distance. But Maya, with her strategic mind and a touch of calculated cruelty, led them to the room where she usually received high-caliber investors. It was an environment that exuded success, power, and a sophistication that brutally contrasted with Ryan and Jessica's reality. She wanted them to smell the unmistakable aroma of expensive coffee, to feel the soft, imposing touch of the leather chairs, the polished shine of a boardroom table that, alone, was worth more than everything they possessed. including their tattered clothes and the few belongings they had left. It was a shock, a forced immersion into a world they had rejected and that now confronted them. Ryan, visibly uncomfortable, held the steaming coffee cup as if it were his last coin, afraid it would slip through his fingers. His eyes, once full of youthful arrogance, now reflected a mixture of fear, shame, and a desperate glimmer of hope. Jessica, meanwhile, stared at the ceiling, as if looking for an escape, a silent prayer that time could turn back, erasing the choices that had led them there. Maya sat at the head of the table, a position of unquestionable command. She folded her hands on the polished surface, a gesture she had learned in expensive leadership courses, a sign of control and determination. Her eyes, once curious, now carried the gravity of a judge about to deliver a sentence. And then she began, "In here, in this very room, the fate of tens of thousands of people has been decided. Projects have been approved, lives have been transformed, fortunes have been built. Today, you will decide yours." The sentence, spoken with a frightening calm, echoed in the silent room, heavy and undeniable. Ryan swallowed hard, the lump in his throat almost preventing him from speaking. "Whatever you want us to do, we'll do it, miss. We just need a plate of food, a roof, anything to survive." His voice was a whisper of desperation, a total surrender. Maya closed her eyes for 3 seconds, a moment of introspection before making the final decision. When she opened them again, something shone that was not a tear, but an iron courage, an unshakable determination. It was the spark of an idea that merged justice with a peculiar form of love. "I will give you food, shelter, a place to sleep, a shower, clean clothes. I will give you dignity, but I will not give you forgetfulness. You will have to carry your own history, every choice you made, every consequence. And here at Nexus Ascend, everyone has to work, without exception. You will start in the electronic sorting department, from 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, with a break for lunch. Minimum wage like any other entry-level employee. If you miss a single day, you lose your job. If you complain about the conditions, you lose your job. If you dare to take from others what you lack, you lose your job. The rules are clear, the demands are high. Are the conditions acceptable?" Jessica nodded so forcefully that her improvised hairstyle, made with the few strands of hair she had left, came undone, some strands falling across her face. Ryan, unable to articulate a complete word, just murmured, his voice almost inaudible. "We don't deserve your kindness." Maya stood up, her posture imposing, her eyes fixed on them. "It's not kindness," she corrected, her voice now soft but firm. "It's justice with the taste of love, and love, my dears, doesn't choose. It just is, it acts, it transforms." And with that declaration, she sealed their fate, offering not an easy way out, but an arduous path to redemption. In the sorting department, the pulsating heart of Nexus Ascend, the boss was Mr. Joe, a man with 15 years of experience as a scrap collector. His voice was hoarse, broken by time and life, but his heart, oh, that was whole, overflowing with practical wisdom and genuine kindness. He was the personification of the dignity Maya so cherished. Mr. Joe, with his infinite patience, showed Ryan and Jessica how to dismantle a desktop, how to separate the components, how to see value where most saw only trash. The secret, my children, Mr. Joe explained, his calloused fingers pointing to a complex motherboard, is to respect the metal. It feeds you, you give back dignity. It's a fair trade, a cycle. He wasn't just teaching a task. He was imparting a life philosophy, a lesson on value and respect that went far beyond electronic circuits. Ryan, with the inexperience and haste of someone who never had to work with his hands, tried to open a Phillips screw with a rusty kitchen knife he found on the floor. The blade snapped with a dry crack, and a deep cut opened on his finger, the blood staining the dirt on the workbench. Mr. Joe, without changing his expression, just watched. Here, those who hurt themselves learn by themselves. Haste is the enemy of perfection, and safety is the friend of life. There was no anger in his voice, just the calm of someone who had seen it all. Jessica, for her part, cried softly, tears streaming down her dirty face. but she held them back so as not to stain the delicate memory chip she was cleaning with an old toothbrush. Every particle of dust removed was a piece of her own shame being washed away, an effort to prove she was still capable of something useful, something valuable. The humiliation was palpable, but the need to start over was greater. By the end of the day, both were exhausted, their bodies aching, their backs on fire, but a small victory warmed their hearts. They managed to fill 2 whole boxes with processors, a feat that, to them, seemed monumental. The sweat, the fatigue, the muscle pain. It was all a testament to honest work, something they hadn't felt in years. Maya, from the glass mezzanine of her office, watched them from afar. She observed every movement, every stumble, every small achievement. She felt a knot in her chest, a complex emotion that wasn't revenge, but something deeper. It was the strange and powerful sensation of seeing the people who threw her away now being recycled themselves. Not just the electronic waste, but the lives, the souls, receiving a second chance, an opportunity to transform into something new, useful, and perhaps even beautiful. It was living proof that trash, in its many forms, could be transformed. On Saturday, a traditional day of rest, Maya invited them to her home. Not the mansion her fortune could easily buy, but the rented little house where she grew up, where Mrs. Antonia, her mother of the heart, still lived. It was a deliberate gesture, an invitation to the place where unconditional love had rescued her. The comforting smell of homemade food, rice, beans, roasted chicken, greeted the 3 at the gate, an aroma that awakened memories and, for Ryan and Jessica, perhaps a glimpse of a life they had lost. "Come in, my children," said Mrs. Antonia, with her sweet and welcoming voice, not knowing, in fact, who these 2 gaunt visitors with frightened eyes and tattered clothes were. To her, they were just needy people her daughter was helping, and her home had always had its doors open to those in need. The living room was simple, unpretentious, but there were fresh flowers in the vase on the table, a touch of beauty that brought life to the room. Maya asked them to sit at the rustic wooden table, the same table that had been restored 3 times by Mr. John, a symbol of resilience and care. During dinner, a hearty and delicious meal, Jessica could barely look at the food. With each spoonful of rice and beans, her mind transported her to the cold nights on the streets, where dinner was often just boiled water to trick her hunger. The irony of the situation was a knot in her stomach. Ryan ate in silence, his head down, his dignity wounded. But hunger, hunger was stronger than shame. Then Maya, feeling the moment was right, decided to pull the trigger, to confront the elephant in the room with the delicacy of a surgeon. "Do you want to know about my childhood?" she asked, her voice low but firm, capturing their attention. Ryan looked up, startled, as if he feared the answer. The accusation he knew was coming. "I was happy," Maya continued, her eyes scanning their faces without anger, just with the clarity of someone who has already processed the pain. "I wasn't rich in money, but I was absurdly rich in love. I learned that e-waste can become a school, that a handout can become a salary. I learned that what we throw away, my dears, becomes a weight on our conscience. And that love is the only thing that truly matters and that truly transforms." Mrs. Antonia, not understanding half the context of that tense conversation, but feeling the emotional weight in the air, added with a maternal smile, "My daughter has always been smart since she was little. A blessing." Maya held her true mother's wrinkled hand, the one life gave her, a gesture of deep affection and gratitude. Then she extended her other hand to Jessica, an invitation, a gesture of reconciliation that defied all logic. "I know you weren't the best parents. You weren't the ones who gave me what I needed back then. But now, by a twist of fate, you need me. And I need people who understand the value of a second chance, of redemption. Shall we build this together? Not as a past, but as a future. Not as resentment, but as a lesson." The silence that followed was filled with tears, not just from Jessica, but from Ryan too. It was a mutual recognition, an unspoken but felt apology, and the tacit promise of a path, however arduous, toward rebuilding. 2 months passed, and the routine in the sorting department had settled in. Ryan and Jessica, though still carrying the scars of the past, were beginning to find a new purpose, a forgotten dignity. However, the tranquility was broken by unsettling rumors. Whispers spread through the company. The former sorting manager, a trusted man, was accepting bribes to divert high-value graphics cards, selling them on the black market. The news hit Maya like a punch to the gut. With her usual determination, Maya called for an immediate internal audit. The investigation revealed the shocking truth. The person responsible for the scheme was, in fact, Mr. Joe, the good-hearted man who had taught Ryan and Jessica to respect the metal. The reason behind his ethical lapse was painful. Mr. Joe, in a desperate act of paternal love, had allowed the diversion to get money to treat his son, who was gravely ill. The dismissal meeting was tense, filled with a deep sadness. Maya, even with her voice choked with disappointment and empathy, did not cry. Her posture, though softened by pain, was unshakable. "Teaching someone to do the right thing when they're being watched is easy," she said, her eyes fixed on Mr. Joe, but the message was for everyone in the room. The real mission is to teach them to do the right thing when no one is looking, when temptation is great and life gets hard. That is what defines character. It was a tough but necessary lesson about integrity and the consequences of choices. Ryan and Jessica, now simply treated as employees by their colleagues, witnessed everything, every word, every look. The scene hit them hard, a mirror of their own failings and the importance of ethics. At the end of the meeting, Maya turned to them, a serious expression on her face. "I want you to take over as coordinators of the sorting department," she announced, taking everyone by surprise, including Ryan and Jessica. The shock was visible. "It's a risk, I know. A huge risk for the company, and maybe for your reputations. But if there's anyone who knows the bitter taste of losing everything, of hitting rock bottom, of having your dignity stolen, it's you. You know the darkness, and that's why I believe you can be the light. Will you help me build a system that won't let anyone else fall into the same hole? One that is foolproof, temptation-proof? Will you use your experience to protect others?" Her words were a challenge, a vote of confidence they never expected. It was the chance to turn the shame of the past into a shield for the future, not just for themselves, but for the company and for everyone who worked there. 6 months under the new management of Ryan and Jessica in the sorting department, and the impossible happened. Inventory loss due to theft dropped an impressive 40%, a feat that seemed unattainable before. The number of computer donations tripled, driven by renewed confidence in the company's integrity. Nexus Ascend, already a beacon of innovation, entered the select list of the best companies to work for in social impact, a recognition that validated not only its mission, but also its management and values. Maya, at 25, stood on a platform set up in the company's courtyard, in front of 1,000 employees, all there to celebrate their success and resilience. The crowd, a sea of hopeful faces, awaited her with anticipation. "Today I celebrate 2 very important dates," she began, her voice reverberating through the microphone, clear and emotional. "The 2nd anniversary of our company, Nexus Ascend, which was born from a bold dream. And perhaps more importantly, the day I stopped running from the fear of being abandoned. The day I turned pain into purpose and hurt into strength." With a gesture, she called Ryan and Jessica to the stage. A murmur of surprise and curiosity rippled through the audience. The microphone trembled in Ryan's hands, not just from the weight of the device, but from the weight of emotion. "I don't deserve to be here," Ryan began. His voice choked, his eyes welling up, but the audience, in a gesture of empathy and recognition, booed his self-loathing, encouraging him to continue. "I learned the hard way that family isn't just blood. Family is who catches you when you fall, who gives you a hand when you have no strength left. Thank you, Maya, for catching me. Thank you all for giving me a second chance." Jessica, her voice now sounding firm and full of genuine gratitude, added, looking directly at Maya, "Thank you, Maya, for not throwing us back out like the trash we were. Thank you for having the courage to recycle us, to transform us. You didn't just recycle electronics. You recycled people. And for that, we will be eternally grateful." Maya took a deep breath, a smile of satisfaction on her lips. She looked at her adoptive mother, Mrs. Antonia, sitting in the front rows, her eyes shining with pride. She gave a signal. Mrs. Antonia, with her serene dignity, came up to the stage. The 3 generations, the abandoned and rescued daughter, the mother who took her in, and the biological parents who found redemption, embraced, creating a picture. An image so powerful, so full of meaning, that no magazine cover dared to refuse it. It was the image of redemption, of forgiveness, and of the unshakable strength of love in all its diverse forms. At the end of the year, a celebratory mood filled the air. Maya, in a gesture that surprised everyone, invited Ryan and Jessica to the launch of Nexus Ascend's long-awaited new technology center, a milestone in the company's expansion. The event was grand, with investors, officials, and the entire team in attendance. Before the curtain rose to reveal the magnitude of the new space, Maya, with an enigmatic smile, handed each of them a small, elegant, and discreet metal case. "Only open them when you're alone," she instructed. Her voice low but full of meaning, piquing their curiosity. Accustomed to following her instructions, they nodded, the cases heavy in their hands. Later, in a quiet corner, away from the spotlight, Ryan and Jessica finally opened the cases. Inside, there was a gleaming key and a small plaque engraved with fine letters. New home, address 44, Second Chance Lane. I chose this street to remind you that there's always a second chance. No matter how distant it seems, the deed is in your names. No going back to the junkyard of old choices. This is your foundation, your new beginning. Maya's words, engraved there, were not just a material gift. They were a promise of a future, a vote of confidence, an irresistible invitation to a new life. Ryan, his legs weak, fell to his knees, his hands trembling, clutching the key to his chest. The tears, once held back by shame, now flowed freely, washing away years of pain and regret. Jessica, beside him, hugged him tightly, and the 2 decades of misery, of wrong choices, of accumulated shame, seemed to drain onto the floor, dissolving into the hope that bloomed in that instant. It was the end of a cycle of suffering, and the beginning of a new one, paved by the grace of a daughter they had abandoned, but who chose to forgive. One evening, a few weeks later, Maya found Ryan in the garden of the technology center, a green oasis amidst the innovation. He was sitting on a bench, looking at the starry sky, an unusual peace on his once anguish-marked face. "Can I ask you a question, Maya?" he asked, his voice hesitant, as if afraid to break the fragile truce they had built. "You can." "But I don't promise an easy answer," she replied, sitting next to him, feeling the cool night breeze. "Why did you help us? Why didn't you leave us there on the streets paying for our mistakes? Why did you give us all this? Why the house, the job, the dignity? Why the forgiveness?" The question, laden with years of guilt and confusion, was finally spoken aloud. Maya took a long time to answer. Her deep, thoughtful eyes watched the stars, which, here on the outskirts, still appeared in abundance, defying the light pollution from the city's streetlights. It was a reminder that beauty and hope can arise in the most unexpected places. Because, "Ryan," she began, her voice soft but firm, "if I had been vengeful, if I had given back to you what you gave me, I would have carried the weight of abandonment forever. The resentment, the anger, the bitterness, they are anchors that tie us to the past, that prevent us from flying." She paused, searching for the right words. "Forgiving you wasn't a gift for you. It was a gift for me. It was the way I found to free myself, to heal my own wounds. And if our story, the story of the 3 of us, can serve as a lesson to anyone, let it be that trash only becomes trash if we leave it sitting there, stagnant, without purpose. But if we move it, if we recycle it, if we transform it, oh, Ryan, then trash becomes a resource, an opportunity, a new life." She looked at him, a gentle smile on her lips. "That's what you unintentionally taught me. That even from the deepest abandonment, something extraordinary can be born, if there is the courage to look at the trash and see the treasure it can become. You showed me the value of what is discarded, and I learned how to transform it. It was a shared epiphany, a mutual understanding that transcended the past and opened the doors to a future of healing and purpose." The conversation with Ryan, that night under the stars, solidified an idea that had already been germinating in Maya's mind. If abandonment had transformed her, she, in turn, could transform the abandonment of others. Thus the Genesis program was born, a bold and profoundly human initiative that would become one of the pillars of Nexus Ascend's social impact. The program was simple in its concept, but revolutionary in its proposal. Any pregnant woman experiencing homelessness or extreme vulnerability could live in a fully equipped house, with all the necessary support during her pregnancy and the first 2 years of the baby's life. It wasn't charity, but an investment in the future. In return, these women would learn a trade within Nexus Ascend, receiving training in various areas, from electronics sorting to equipment assembly and maintenance, guaranteeing them not only a roof over their heads, but also a profession and dignity. The press, always eager for inspiring stories, asked Maya if there was any personal inspiration behind such a specific and focused initiative. With her characteristic honesty, she replied, her eyes moist but her voice firm. Every child deserves a start. A safe, loved, opportunity-filled start. Every parent, no matter how much they've erred, deserves a chance at redemption, a chance to prove they can be better. And every mother especially deserves support, infrastructure, and the dignity to be able to care for her child without the desperation of the streets. She paused, the silence filled by the gravity of her words. I can't change the past. I can't undo what happened to me, but I can, with my story and the strength of Nexus Ascend, change the cycle. I can offer a new beginning for these mothers and their babies, breaking the chain of abandonment and misery. It's my way of honoring the child I was, the woman I've become, and the mother who never abandoned me. It was the epiphany of a lifetime, the transformation of pain into a legacy of hope and opportunity for countless families. Today, Nexus Ascend is not just a company. It is a movement, a beacon of hope and innovation. It processes tons of e-waste per month, diverting it from landfills and transforming it into valuable resources. It has generated over 3,000 direct and indirect jobs, impacting not only the employees, but their families and entire communities. It has moved 120 million in social impact, a tangible testament to its mission. Maya, now 25, has become a global speaker, sought after at international forums, universities, and tech events. She always begins her talks with the same sentence, spoken with a smile that blends wisdom and a touch of irony. I was thrown away. And, believe it or not, I'm grateful for it, because I learned to value what people throw away and to see the potential where most only see discard. Ryan and Jessica, in one of the greatest examples of redemption the company has ever seen, coordinate the compliance department of Nexus Ascend. They are the ones who write the ethical manuals, who ensure the company operates with the highest integrity, who monitor and educate on the importance of best practices. Who better to create a foolproof system than those who intimately know human failure? Their life experience has become a valuable tool to protect the company and its values. When someone, from time to time, asks Maya if it isn't strange to have her biological parents as subordinates, working under her leadership, she smiles, a smile that is a lesson in maturity and forgiveness. Hierarchy doesn't erase history, she explains, her voice calm and didactic. It just puts it in its proper place. History shows us where we came from, what we've overcome. Hierarchy shows us where we are going, and how we will get there together, building a better future for everyone. They are my biological parents, yes, but above all, they are my collaborators, my partners in building a more just and sustainable world. And that, to me, is the true legacy. So what part of this story got to you the most? Was it the shocking coldness of the abandonment, that initial act that changed everything? Or the unbreakable strength of the adoption, the love that rescued a life and made it flourish? Maybe it was the twist of fate, the irony that brought their paths to cross again. Or perhaps the almost superhuman courage to forgive, to transform pain into a greater purpose. Leave a comment below telling us what lesson you'll take with you, what part made you think, moved you, or inspired you. Your perspective is very important to us, and if you think this story is worth telling, that it can touch more hearts, then please share it. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything, and turn on the notification bell to be alerted for the next stories of overcoming that we have prepared for you. And always remember, my friend, what is trash to you can be a priceless treasure to someone else. What really matters in the end is not what life throws at us, but what we do with what we receive. It's our ability to transform, to recycle, to give a second chance. Until the next video, go with God and never, ever throw anyone away. Because the world turns in such surprising ways that even a shopping cart with a little love and a lot of courage can become a throne.